Welcome to Taxbytes for Expats, the top tax tips you want to know as an expat. The podcast is here to help answer the common queries and concerns expats have when moving to or from Ireland. Complex taxes explained simply. We'll focus on the Irish and international tax issues to be aware of to ensure you save time, money, and stress.
Avoid the hassle of dealing with your bank and transfer online, by app or over the phone or Currencies Direct today. Keep listening for an exclusive offer for Taxbytes for Expats listeners, and thanks to Currencies Direct for their support of this podcast. It's the use of the word home, isn't it? Because home makes you think that, you know, when you think of like your childhood home, you walk into it and you're like, oh, I'm back. I don't have to kind of work hard to feel comfortable there. When you use the word home about returning to a country, the country changes. You know, the people have changed, things have changed, you've changed, like you said. I think that's a really good thing to be aware of going into it, is that if you do hit that 6-9 month period and go, oh, did we make the right decision? Just, you're not alone in feeling like that. You know, this too will pass. And obviously everyone's experience is different, but, you know, do you guys work with people who are kind of in those moments, or generally are you talking to people about other things and this comes up in conversation?
It's really that it comes up in conversation, and it's probably the space that we're situated within. People, you know, people will talk to us about this stuff that maybe they don't feel that they can talk to about with their family. You know, I suppose if you're telling a family member who's been yearning for you to come home that 9 months in, you're still not sure if this was the right decision, it's loaded, right? So I think for us, it comes up in conversation when we're linking in with people about other things. It's always a peripheral thing. No one's starting out going, I'm really struggling with this, right? And I suppose we're very conscious of our limitations as well, right? So I mentioned we're 3 people in an office in Dublin, and we've supported 1,500 people in the last year. You know, that's a lot of work that goes into that. And I suppose we are funded by the Irish government, but we've seen the demand in what we do increase severely, particularly on the crisis piece around, you know, people returning from conflict zones, repatriations happening, deportations from the States. So we don't always have, I feel, enough time to spend with people when they are going through that sort of, I suppose, the mental health piece of return. And what I'd love to see is more supports in that sort of area, and a sort of a conversation happening. You know, that so many people do feel this way, and it isn't unique to Ireland. You look at anywhere in the world where people are returning, and there's that adjustment piece. There is potentially a homesickness for the home that someone's left, right? You can have multiple homes.
And you become, you know, you hit the nail on the head. You become, sometimes it's difficult to talk about, you know, what you left, because, you know, you might reminisce about, oh, I remember when we used to do barbecues on the beach on Friday evening, and people are kind of like, well, you chose to come home, you know, you don't need to repeat it, tell us how. So it can be difficult, that middle bit where, you know, you had a happy or an established life, maybe things changed, you decided to come back, and it can be a lonely place sometimes. So it's nice to know then, obviously, you're not the only one. It's normal. It's normal to feel like that. And, you know, whether you're emigrating for the first time or returning, these are things just to be aware of. Knowing it in advance is helpful.
Absolutely. And I mean, there are things like there's a small returned emigrant network that is run by our partners, Safe Home Ireland, that meets virtually. And I think there's people who join that. There's other spaces like the Irish expats returning to Ireland, where people, you know, do share their experiences and so on. But I think just more broadly, those conversations, when they're happening with people that are also going through that experience, and that's really good. But I think there needs to be a bit of an awareness as well within our own families and at you know, across Ireland, that it isn't just, as I said, return migration isn't just reverse emigration. There's so much more that comes with that.
What kind of planning do you see as being helpful for somebody who is, you know, in the planning phase of coming back? What do you like to see people do before they return?
Obviously, the first thing is this the right decision that the person's making for themselves? What are the the push factors, the pull factors. Very often we speak to people and we're like, why do you want to come home? And they're like, I want to be closer to family. And it's like, okay, so starting with that, let's look at all the peripheral stuff that you might need to make that happen. So what are you thinking in terms of work? What are you thinking in terms of your children and going to school? Which area are you going to situate yourself? So I suppose people asking themselves questions rather than from the starting point, well, I'm just moving back. Like, okay, well, let's explore that. What does that actually look like for you? Right? Exactly. And then just on the very practical side of things, I mean, it's really important that people gather as much documentation about their lives abroad so that when they're moving that, they're able to have all that to hand. So, I mean, things like when they're opening bank accounts, or indeed they want to register with a doctor, they're able to transfer medical records. These sound like really simple things, but you'd be amazed at the amount of people who are like, oh yeah, I'll just sort that out when I get to Ireland. And it can take so much longer, for instance, to try and get information when you're in Ireland rather than when you're on the spot and you're gathering all of that, even down to things like birth certificates for children, marriage certificates, all that stuff. It always amazes me that a lot of the time people are like, oh yeah, well, I'll just sort that stuff out. And you're like, well, you kind of need it for the beginning. You kind of need that foundation for everything that you want to do when you're back in Ireland. I suppose the other piece is looking at accommodation. That's got to be top of the list. Very practically speaking, it's a macro issue. It's affecting the whole of Irish society, but it is going to affect you more as a returning Irish immigrant for all the reasons we mentioned. You might not have the same networks. You might be looking to live in an area that now has suddenly gone really expensive. So doing a lot of research, gathering a lot of documentation, and really just asking hard questions to yourself before making that move, it'll really stand you in good stead when you're back in Ireland, because you've explored some of the harder things before moving back. And look, there is, I suppose, a privilege to being able to go through that process in a way. Mm-hmm. For a lot of people, it's not the case. Some people don't have any choice but to come back. And organizations like ourselves exist to support them to try and, link into support systems in the state. It can be quite challenging on return for someone who, say, as I said, has had their life upended by war or conflict, or has received a deportation order after living somewhere for a very long period of time. And they don't have the luxury, I suppose, of doing all that planning. So for people who can do it, it's really important too.
Yeah, exactly. Don't take for granted the time you have to plan, if you have it. And now a quick word on our episode sponsor, Currencies Direct. If you're looking for a fast, easy way to transfer money to or from Ireland without the hassle and cost of dealing with your bank, keep it simple with Currencies Direct. Whether you're buying property or require regular currency transfers, Currencies Direct can help you save money. As a special offer for our listeners, when you use the link in the show notes and quote expat taxes when registering with Currencies Direct, you'll receive a €50 one-for-all or Amazon voucher when you transfer €5,000 or more in your first 6 months with Currencies Direct. Registration is quick and easy, and you decide how you transfer 24/7 via their online money transfer service, over the phone with one of their friendly experts, or by using their handy mobile app. Check the show notes or head to currenciesdirect.com to register. And thanks to Currencies Direct for the support of this podcast. What supports do you think exist that people just are not aware of, that you wish people knew more about?
Yeah, so I think not just on the return side of things, but I think certainly a lot of the newer generation might not necessarily be linking in with the network of Irish groups and supports that exist. And that's for a number of reasons. You don't necessarily want to go abroad and spend your time in Irish spaces. Absolutely fair enough. But at the same time, what we find is that plugging into Irish networks abroad means that a person kind of has an in, if you like. They have like a base, a launch pad, if you will. So whether that's business networks, and they exist all over the world, you'd be amazed. I was in Serbia, and there's an Irish-Serbian Chamber of Commerce doing great work out in Belgrade, Wow. Or whether it's you have children and you want them to retain the Irish language, or you want them to still be connected with Irish culture. There's so many things like pop-up girl talks and, dancing and music that exists even in places like Belgium. I mean, I think that in Belgium, for instance, there's a real community that are Irish speakers. You wouldn't just assume that is the case, but it is. And so I think for new generations of immigrants, finding those spaces and using them to connect, it's quite helpful. And also then there's supports that come through that, right? So we've seen when tragedies have happened, GAA clubs, for instance, doing fundraisers for someone who's had an accident, a farming accident in Australia, the supports are not necessarily formal, but the fact is Irish people are everywhere, all over the world, and have found places to connect with one another. And I think that can come as a surprise to people. And maybe it's not something they look for until they need it, right?
Yeah.
Which is absolutely fair. But the fact that Ireland is unique in the fact that it has this immigrant support program fund, this fund dedicated to setting up places for connection for Irish people abroad. When it comes to diaspora engagement, diaspora engagement has sort of become a buzzword, and we're seeing it all over now. I mean, you have countries in the Balkans engaging with their diaspora and indeed their returning diaspora. And there's a lot of really meaningful connections happening there. But the fact that Ireland is actually funding support organizations like ourselves to do work in the nonprofit space is highly unique. And I think often people don't know enough about that.
And I think, even people listening to this, some people may not even know about the project that you run. And just listen to you talk, so important. Sometimes it's about helping people in time of need, and that need will look different. It can be a crisis, or it could just be a need for access to information, from a trusted source.
Yeah.
Because as much as we can find out so much online, sometimes we get so much information, there's always something reassuring about a government-backed source, isn't there? To kind of having some place to go.
I think so. And I suppose we sit in the in-between, right? Non-governmental organization, it's in the name. Like we can, have conversations with people and meet them where they're at in a way that maybe a State Department might not be able to, right? But I would say that, I think it's really important that people have these conversations with others who are going through the same experience once they take what the other person's experience is with a big pinch of salt, right? Because everyone's experience is unique, and you may not know the intricacies or the unique points that a person has been through, or their particular circumstances. It's not really a one size fits all when it comes to this. And sometimes I worry a little bit, particularly in the online space. As you say, there's so much information, but there's so much presented as, well, this is the way it is, when in fact, it may not be for you, right?
100%. And I think an observation I would have, and it's purely my opinion, is that the people sometimes who haven't had a good experience will tend to hang out there and talk about it. But the reality is that the other 99% of people who it's probably gone very well for, haven't taken the time to check in to talk about how positive their experience was. Now, I'm being facetious, but the point I'm making is, it's generally somebody who's discontent who'll take the time to talk about it, because that's life, isn't it? You move on.
That's life. Yeah. I think you could say that about anything,
Exactly.
A bad experience. I mean, we'll all go and talk about the bad experience we have. Even in a work context, there's all the amazing things you might be doing in work, but the thing that you're vocalizing is the thing that you're frustrated about the most, right? So
exactly. But when you're searching for information in a specific form, being mindful of that can because it can sometimes be a bit depressing if somebody asks a question and then there's just negative responses when they may not be representative of what the majority of people experienced. That's basically the point I'm trying to make.
Exactly. And I think that does happen. And I think that particularly in forums, it does gravitate towards a negative. That's not to say that, the fact that someone has had a difficult or bad experience is false. Absolutely not. But it isn't. But as you say, it isn't necessarily what the person who's looking for the information needs at that time, right?
Mm-hmm. So I think, having access to a variety of different sources and different lived experiences is invaluable. And, that's where the type of work that you guys do really comes to fruition. What If somebody's listening today to this episode and they're quietly thinking about coming back, what would be the biggest piece of advice that you'd give them at this point in time?
So I think starting with the information piece, there are places that people can go to get that impartial information to help them make a decision. So I've mentioned it already, but the citizensinformation.ie Returning to Ireland portal is a great starting point. And then our own website, diasporasupport.ie as well, for things that are perhaps a little more targeted if someone thinks that they might need to access, say, a social welfare payment on return while they're looking for work. Those, I would say, are the starting points for gathering information. Then really, as I said, looking at what they want their life in Ireland to look like and looking at whether things are realistic or not, right? Sometimes we say to people, if they have it in their power to trial a period, right? So to come back for, say, an extended period of time, 1 or 2 months, and to start doing some of the groundwork here before they move over wholesale, particularly if you're moving an entire family over to somewhere you haven't lived for the last 18 years. If you have that ability, that's a really good idea. And then listen, I suppose the other thing is just in terms of employment, we've come a long way from having to fly over to Ireland for interviews and things like that. So much can be done remotely and virtually. And there are, there's particular sectors that are actively recruiting for Irish people in the diaspora, So I suppose looking at your own networks, your own connection points abroad and saying, how can you transit from that to come into Ireland for work purposes? And then I suppose there's going to be things that people need specialized information around. So like I mentioned, if you're coming back with a non-Irish partner or a non-Irish spouse, what does that look like for you? It might be that you want to return in 2 months' time, but you're going to have to wait for 2 years for a visa for your loved one. And that's going to change the face of your planning, if you will. So, we're always happy to hear from people, and we do get a lot of people who email us through our website, diasporasupport.ie, going, I really don't know where to start. And what we start with is asking them questions about their circumstances, and then we can signpost them on. And in some cases, that'll be it. That'll be the interaction that we have with them. But they're going off with something that's a little bit more focused around how to start the process of planning a return.
Such a fantastic resource, because sometimes that's what you want, isn't it? In the kind of the age we live in of AI and information everywhere, you sometimes just want a human to kind of point you in, where should I go? And is that kind of answering perhaps my next question, Sarah? How do people interact with you? Where do they find Crosscare predominantly? And if they want to learn more, where would you like them to go first?
Yeah, so I'm conscious that a lot of the listeners are probably abroad, so diasporasupport.ie is our website. There's plenty of information on there. There's also a contact us or a get help form that people can fill in where we ask some questions around their circumstances, and then we respond to them usually by email. We are based in Dublin, and we operate an appointment system. So say, for instance, for someone who is moving back and is going to need to have some assistance from us when it comes to engaging with services or filling in forms or things like that, we have a team here and we make an appointment and they come into our offices in Dublin. We can also facilitate things like Zoom calls, whilst a person is abroad. I suppose what we try and do is tailor our approach to a person's need. And it might be that we go, you know what, we can only help you this far. You need to go to X, Y, and Z source, right? So we signpost as well. And I will just say that, in times where we're dealing with a lot of crisis cases, it can sometimes take us a little while to get back to people. And a lot of what we do is really managing people's expectations, not just about like how we can engage with them, but, what they're going to have to do themselves when they get back. And hopefully that can act, as I said, as a little sort of springboard for them to know where to start.
Nice welcome, isn't it? When we talk, we start the conversation about coming home, what it's like. It's a nice welcome back, because you can kind of land in Dublin Airport and collect your bag. I remember us doing it, with 2 kids and loads of bags, and you do mentally feel like you have a mountain to climb. You don't have PPS numbers, you don't have doctors, you don't have childcare, you don't have a home. It's daunting, and a lot of us are really lucky that we have family to kind of guide us and support us and give us lodging and all these different things that we need. But it's lovely to hear that there is other support groups there as well, depending on people's circumstances. I really hope people listening to this take the chance to check the website out and go so far as to reach out. I'm not sure you'll thank us given how busy you are already, but I can sense that you guys are available and very keen to help people. So it's really lovely. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain to us the fantastic work that you do.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, and it's great to have the opportunity to do that, because I suppose we'd say ourselves, there's only so much we can do when it comes to building profile, and there's only so much capacity as well that we have, right? So, if one listener comes away from this going, you know what, I think I know where to start, or I know how to progress my idea of moving back, then that's a success.
Good start to the day. Thank you so much, Sarah. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Steph.
Thanks for listening to Taxbytes for Expats. Please do leave a rating or review wherever you listen to your podcast. And as always, remember to take professional tax advice specific to your personal circumstances before acting or refraining from action in connection with the matters dealt with in this series. The material in this podcast is intended to give general guidance only.